Good morning and welcome to the Sport for Business Daily. We're joined this morning by the Ard Stiurthóir, or Chief Executive Officer of the Camogie Association, Sinead McNulty. You're very welcome.
Thanks very much, Rob. Thanks for having me here.
It's a pleasure. The reason, amongst many, that we're talking today is that you've published a new National Camogie Development Plan, and it is drawn from the membership, it's drawn from looking at best practice across other sport, but it's defined by four key phrases of passion, people, pride, and place. Those sound like the words that would have come from the mouths of a dedicated player, fan, coach, volunteer at club level. This looks like it's a real grassroots driven plan. Would that be fair?
Yes, it absolutely is, Rob. We did a huge amount of consultation in preparation of the plan, and I suppose we took feedback and reviewed the previous National Development Plan and took all of the strengths of that and all of the positivity from it, and asked people then why were they involved in Camogie? What was their reasoning for getting involved? What was the reasoning for staying involved? And I don't know if you've read a book called Start With Why, but it's well worth a read, and that was the basis of our questioning when we were doing the consultations with people, is why are you involved? Why is Camogie the sport that it is? And what more can we do with it? And those four words came out over and over in the surveys and in the conversations with people when they described their reason for being involved, when they described their happiest moments in Camogie, when they described their best memories, and why they stay involved when sometimes life is so busy and there's lots of other things you could do, but actually they give their time and dedicate so much of their time to Camogie, whether that's as a player, as a coach, as a referee, as a volunteer, as an administrator, or someone who just helps around the club environment. So it definitely did come from the grassroots. I suppose it's very important. I'm a year in the job now, and it was very important for me to have a good understanding of what people wanted, that it's not just me coming in with a vision, but actually what do people on the ground want from Camogie? If you're going to build on what has gone before, if you're going to build on the shoulders of giants like that, you have to fully understand it, and you have to understand and bring people with you on the journey, or in the same direction, is the key part of it, without sounding too cliched. So those words just totally describe the passion of the game, and everything that it's about. It is around people. It is who you meet, and the pride and the heritage of, I suppose, being Irish, it being a Camogie, being a heritage sport recognised by UNESCO, and that we have a place in the world which sometimes we don't stand up for enough. And that was a really key part of what we want to do over the next 4 years, is to embed Camogie and grow Camogie's reach and really establish it in its own right, and not just as a little sister of a larger organisation.
Okay, there has always been a view. I'm involved in the GAA and in Camogie and ladies football, and there was always a view expressed to me by hurling coaches on the men's side that that football was a sport, but that hurling was much more akin to a religion. And I think perhaps the same feeling applies in ladies football and Camogie. But all four of those strands do operate very much cheek by jowl at club level. We play on the same pitches. There are many benefits to the fact that they're so closely aligned, and yet there would be many, even at club level, who would be unaware of the fact that they're governed by three different associations. You've mentioned in the document that you've got an ambition that there should be parity across the Gaelic Games family within the lifetime of this document. So by 2023, that looks like a fairly big ask, or is it? Or is it really the fact that parity is more or less there? It's just that last 10% that we need to get to in terms maybe of the administration side.
Yeah, I suppose it depends on what angle you're looking from. Certainly, I know in my own club, ladies Gaelic football, Camogie, we're all alongside with the men's games as well. But it depends on where you're based around the country and the sort of history and development and growth of your club. At a national level, we're working very closely together on a number of projects. So that's the foundation coaching course, leadership development, and we've worked together on the roadmap for the return to Gaelic Games. But I suppose there's a huge amount of opportunity to do more. The Camogie Association signed a memorandum of understanding with the GAA 3 years ago and set out key things that we wanted to achieve over a 3-year period. So is achieving in 4 years parity an ambitious statement? Yes, it is, and we had much debate about it when we were preparing the National Development Plan. But I suppose if you don't say where you want to go, if you don't say what you want to achieve and name it and write it down and make sure that everybody's aware of it, say it early, have the hard conversations early, and then work your way towards it. We've made huge strides over the last 5 to 10 years. There's still work to do, and there's challenges there. And I think around our governance, when you try and bring 3 associations together who've got the history that we have, you're looking at close on 300 years of history between the whole lot of us. So that's a whole lot of history and a whole lot of feeling and sensitivity to bring into a room together to try and sort out. So yes, it is ambitious. Parity is again a word we chose carefully. So you talked about hurling being a religion. It's an art, camogie is an artful sport. It is an art form in itself, and we need to be recognised as that. We are a very small team of staff. At the minute, we've got 18 full-time staff in the association, managing to 100,000 members. So we achieve a huge amount for a small group of people, but that's based on the volunteers that are around us. So I suppose recognising our volunteers, recognising our coaches, our referees, our staff, and our players as the skillful people that they are, as the talented, educated and professional in their approach. That recognising all of those things I think is really important in terms of establishing ourselves as a best practice national governing body for sport, and working with our colleagues in LGFA and GAA to work together and serve our communities. Because the bottom line is, and we've discovered it through COVID all the time, it's the same families, whether the children are playing camogie, whether they're playing Gaelic football, if they're boys or girls, it's the same families that are coming in and getting involved in clubs. And really those clubs where people don't know that there's 3 organisations at the top, that's what you want. You don't want people to have perceptions about 3 different organisations. You want, a club member to go in, pay the membership, and their children or their adult members to be treated exactly the same in the club environment. That's the bit. It's around making sure that there is an equity around access to facilities and access to opportunities. And we've done a lot of work on that, and we'll continue to do it. There's a lot of good conversations happen between Helen and Tom and myself around where we're going to go. And not without challenges. Nobody's going to pretend that that'll be an easy journey, but it's something we have to do. Camogie deserves it. That's
okay. Good leadership, good people. There's probably more people at club level now will be aware of it by virtue of the different forms of health questionnaire that you have to fill out for boys and girls and football and hurling and camogie and every other which way. You just reconfirm. But anyway, we'll come back to COVID in a little bit. You mentioned facilities there, and that has always been a challenge that we operate on a one club model in a large swathe of the Gaelic Games family, and yet that sense of claiming pitch time and pitch space and being able to then let other clubs know and other counties know where we're going to be has always been a challenge. It's listed as one of those priorities in there. And you've mentioned about the fact, I know there has been some talk of, developing camogie facilities at a national or regional level. Is that something that is very much on the agenda? Is pitches is the one P word that didn't make it onto the 4 P words that we spoke about earlier, but it's one of the most important ones.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I suppose some of it comes from our history and how we evolved to be where we are. The Camogie Association as a national entity doesn't own facilities. We have units who do own or have long-term leases on facilities around the country, but it's a small number. What we don't necessarily have is, and that's why a facility strategy or a needs audit is part of the National Development Plan actions. we need to understand what we need as an association, and instead of coming at it, I suppose, coming at it from the top down, what do we need as an association to function, from an All-Ireland final date for every single age group all the way back to every single club match? How many games do we need to have a year? What type of facilities do we need to have? The impact of having access to high quality facilities on players is huge. And, you know, every county player wants to play in their own county venue for their club championship, and they'd love to play their home games in their county venue as well. Why isn't that possible? Well, depending on the county, and there's loads of different challenges there. What we want to do is eliminate any of the challenges that are human and put in place structures and processes for making sure that our players get access to the right facilities at the right time to develop their game in the way that they should. So it's not that the Camogie Association wants to go and replicate facilities all over the country. There's no logic to that. But it's about really understanding what it is that we need. What are the levels of access? How many teams do we have? What type of training do they need to do? And the numbers of times that they need to access pitches, gyms, all of that. And then developing an approach with our partners who are in pitch ownership, and working with them to develop a way that is reasonable and approachable. I suppose we're Irish associations, so we come from a place where land is important, and it's important to have ownership, and that's, you know, you can't deny that. So that's just how it is. And people have fought really hard to get the pitches and the facilities that they have, so they're obviously going to be protective of them. But it is changing that perspective of having three associations and moving it around to that perspective of one family. So it's very, again, it's challenging, and people are understandably nervous because nobody wants to see their pitches damaged. Like we saw 10 weeks of sunshine during lockdown when nobody could move, and we've seen nothing but rain since lockdown.
Yeah.
And started to lift, but but you know, like, it's challenging because now we're looking at our intercounty games taking place in the darker evenings of the year. So you're looking for places with floodlights, you're looking for places with maybe all weathers. You're looking at Croke Park having limitations on how many matches can take place every single weekend. So there are always going to be challenges, and it's a bit of loaves and fish. It's like you're talking about things like the urban-rural divide, where you have rural environments which had beautiful pitches and might have had the pitches, and the population base is no longer there to use those, and the population base has moved into the city. So how do we support, as a national governing body, how do we strategically plan to provide facilities for the population and the demographic that we're currently working with? We talk about growing the games, we talk about getting you know, more young people involved in camogie, making sure that we've camogie in more schools at a primary and secondary level, and getting them through, getting more teams playing at a third level. They have facilities, but we need to work with our colleagues in all of these places when they're developing facilities. We need to work with local authorities and local sports partnerships to strategically plan where camogie accessible facilities are going to be. And I suppose we have to have a think in a different way around ownership. Do camogie need to own lots and lots of facilities around the place? Not necessarily, but is there a logic to being involved in partnership with local authorities who are developing facilities and stating clearly what our needs are, and then living to those needs? I suppose that would be how I would be looking at it. It's a long-term vision, Rob. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, and certainly the COVID-19 impact on things like the large-scale sport infrastructure fund are going to be, you know, we'll wait and see how it all pans out, but it's not looking brilliant.
Well, ownership is most important for the 60 minutes it takes to play a game, I guess. You had your first year, you managed to develop a really good sense of momentum. You know, within an ace of 25,000 at the All Ireland, 330,000, the most watched women's sport event over the course of 2019, and a brilliant game as well. So people got to see the sport at its, you know, in its absolute pomp. And then COVID hit. And that it's been obvious the impact that it's going to have across all sports. In a financial sense, very important. The government has made available some funds so that will mitigate against those. But you mentioned schools and colleges. I know your own background is from the education and from the local authority, so you're well placed in order to look at that. But is there a danger that the impact of COVID on the the people coming into the game might actually be of greater longer term concern than the immediate short term impact. I know it's going to be difficult. You're going to have to play 4 championships in the space of 8 weeks, whereas you'd normally have 22 weeks to play them off. But that will pass, and Christmas will come, and next year will start. But if we're struggling with schools and colleges in terms of getting people back into the classroom, how are we going to be fixed in terms of getting them out onto pitches to play team sports?
Yeah, I mean, it's really challenging. I suppose just to go back to 2019, it was hugely successful, but that was not just me parachuting into the job and taking credit for it. There was huge work that went on by my predecessors to set up everything that happened in 2019. We have an amazing team of staff who put in huge work. We tried new things when it came to the All-Ireland final last year, and they worked. They paid off. We called out our members. You know, one of the key messages: if all of our members bought a ticket for the All-Ireland, or took up their free tickets for the All-Ireland if they were offered them from someone, we would fill Croke Park, and that's without any COVID restrictions. So that, you know, there's an amazing piece of work that happened with the team, and there's a real dynamic with the team, and I just need to give them credit for that in 2019, and also for the momentum that they've managed to sustain in COVID-19, because it's been so challenging to redraw everything that we had planned. Our National Development Plan was due to launch at Congress on the 3rd and 4th of April. And we're launching it now because I suppose things are looking a little brighter, and it's the right time. So that momentum continued through training and education of our volunteers. So to go back to your question, I suppose around schools and education, like, schools are key partners of ours, both at a primary and a secondary level, and also our 3rd level, the CCAO. And they're vital for us in terms of, one, getting young players into the game. So young people, students in primary school whose parents may not have a tradition in Gaelic Games, who may not have experienced Camogie before. Schools are a great avenue for us to give them an experience of the game, to get them to hold a hurl, hit a sliotar for the first time, and schools are vital for us for that. Bringing them through to 2nd level and getting the experience of playing a competition in their schools and colleges finals, like, those days are absolutely phenomenal, you know, from an attendance point of view. And to 3rd level, where at the minute some people transition back into the game who maybe didn't play in secondary school if their school didn't have it, and it's what is really going to be key for us in the future in developing long-term camogie involvement. That idea of social camogie, of hanging out with your friends. You don't have to train championship level training 3 nights a week and play a game at the weekend. It can be a social and enjoyable experience that way. So those, you know, those 3 are key for us in terms of the education. COVID is going to change it. None of us know what's going to happen in advance of a vaccine being tested and approved and widely available at a reasonable cost. We're going to be living a different life, and certainly I know, looking at my nieces and nephews, their parents are trying to plan for school, and how are they going to coordinate 7 children going to a school on different days at different times, because they're different classes, even though they're all from the same family, and usually it's like a Venga bus going, you know, getting everybody up to school. But trying to just get them to class is going to be so hard. The likes of after school activities are going to require that little bit extra, and our clubs have done it, and they've done it really, really well. Since we went back on the 24th of June, our clubs have pulled out all the stops to ensure that young people and adults got back to play the games. Are our schools going to be in a position to do that? Their priority has to be obviously to get the kids back into school and pull out all the stops for that. Are they going to be in a position to do after school activity and play camogie after school? I'd love to say yes, but it's unlikely that it'll be the first priority. And I think in some ways that's where some of the additional resources need to go, is to support in the after school activity and continue that. If the children are already operating a safe pod, let's keep their PE happening in a safe pod as well. They need to be physically active now more than ever, to offset some of the mental health issues that are starting to arise out of lockdown and everything else. So I think it's really important that PE, physical activity, is prioritised. And yes, we're going to have to look at things in a different way, but let's do that. See the challenge, face it, figure it out, and put something in place. Let's test things. We do amazing work with second level schools, where we do in-service training with the teachers and upskill them with the latest coaching skills. So Niall Williams, our coach developer, he's developed all these programs, and they're rolled out with our Sabrina and Stuart. They run our on a provincial level in Munster and Leinster. They deliver all these programs to teachers. So we have teachers out there who want to deliver camogie, who want to give back and want to engage and get more young people playing. So we need to harness those. We need to develop the club and school links a lot more, so that if a school can do it and can't provide camogie to people, can we link that school more closely with the club and try and set things up in that way? If we have that transition, a soft transition, easy transition from school to club and club to school, maybe it's going to be possible to do more camogie. I think people have to be creative and not just think in the silo of school, club, camogie, you know, three separate things. They need to be, how do we do it all together? Because bottom line is, kids need sport. For me, I need playing camogie. That's the, you know, they're our All Ireland and our All Stars of the future. So we have to get them at a young age.
Okay. The role of a CEO is that you have to look in many different directions. You've got to look at the horizon of the short term for getting this year's championship played with your sponsors, Liberty Insurance, of course. And then you've got the longer term horizon of the health of the sport as well. The development plan, I guess, falls between those two. You've been good in terms of outlining, you know, the 4 key areas and then 12 key action points within that. The metrics that you're applying to them as well are very specific. You've taken some time to actually look at how measurement is going to be done, as opposed necessarily to it just being up there as something of an airy-fairy aspirational, sort of reference point. Is that important?
Yeah, it's really important to me, and I don't know whether it's coming from the academic environment. In some ways, we started with trying to understand what it was we wanted to show. So if we talked about something, if we talked about participation, I was like, well, who? Participation by who? For what? For how long? And instead of just having things about a number on a day and a snapshot and just being measured by that, it's really more about the outcome and the long-term impact of the work that we do. So evaluation is a key part of it. S3 Solutions were the consultants who worked with us on the development of our National Development Plan, and they come from an evaluation background as well. They've evaluated a lot of community-based projects, so they kind of understood where I was coming from. I'm coming from sports development background, community development background, worked in third level and local authorities, as you said. So for me, it's around outcomes, so it's behavior change. And to give you an example, you could measure the output. So you could measure, if we run a coaching course and we've run 10 coaching courses a year with 10 people on them, the output there is 100 coaches trained. What I'm more interested in for the Camogie Association is, of those 100 coaches, how many of them are actively coaching? How many of them are still coaching 3 months later? How many of them have gone on to seek further education, have participated in other training courses with us? How many of them have gone on to become a level 2 coach? And are they staying involved in the association year on year? So it's a much more longer term plan rather than just looking for short, sharp wins. Because I suppose certainly from the sports development side, it's easy, and sometimes it's more glamorous to show a big, a big success factor, one big day that has gone really well. But when I'm looking back in 4 years' time at the end of this, I want to see, is there a fundamental change across the culture of camogie and across the growth of camogie? Has our baseline grown? Have we developed in all aspects in an incremental way that's sustainable? And that's, I suppose it's a key part of my vision for the association, is that anything we do, rather than throwing money at something and having one big bang, that we throw money in a very careful and measured way, and we evaluate and we review and we make decisions based on the evidence that we get back to make sure that we're always doing the best thing for the association, so that every decision is based on evidence and everything that we do is in the best interest of the association. And that's hard, you know, it's not easy, because it'll be much nicer for me to say to you, right, here's my 5 big numbers that we're going to have in the next 4 years. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. But, you know, we've had really good support from Sport Ireland. So they've supported us in the National Development Plan, but in setting up the evaluation as well. And they've challenged us in terms of the evaluation metrics that we put in, as to how we would evaluate them, and we had to, you know, tweak them. We've also put in some things that are designed by Sport Ireland, so looking at the M1 measure on participation, so that we'll be able to engage and compare our data with data from other sports and from different local sports partnership projects across Ireland. So now we're building a fuller picture of our impact on the sports community in Ireland, and be that on a geographical basis by county or as a whole. And I think that is where, as a sport, we want to go. And I suppose looking at, you know, where sport is going internationally, it is about measuring your progress in that sustainable way, rather than, you know, look at Sport England and what they've been trying to do over the years. And they have discovered that it really comes down to understanding who your people are, why they do what they do, and reacting and responding to changes in the demographics and changes in people's lives, so that you're designing projects not because you think they're a good idea, but they're actually meeting the need of your client base and who you're trying to serve. So for us, it all comes back to people playing the game, and what do they need, and what do they need to play more often to bring more friends and to stay involved as a coach, a mentor, a volunteer, an administrator, when they decide to hang up their boots temporarily, or please stay on social camogie. Like that's really where we want to go.
That's it. And you're going to have, by virtue of success, by virtue of having 100,000 players, you've probably got 100,000 opinions out there as well. And you will be challenged on different elements of the plan over the 4 years, but you'll be well up for it. You've got a good team of sponsors there, Liberty, Littlewoods, Ireland, AIB sponsoring the club championships as well. So, you know, it's a good team of staff, good team of sponsors, good team altogether. And well done on producing a document like this in your second year of leadership. I've no doubt that over the next 4 years we'll be dropping back in every now and again just to check on how the plan is developing. But for the moment, thanks a million for taking the time out to explain it to our viewers in such good detail. So Sinead McNulty, Gurmila Magat.
Gurmila Magat, Slán.